All right, we are coming up on 10:30 and we should be live. Welcome audience. Welcome to our Friends of the Waters session. We're here with a bunch of local friends groups. But first, a little bit of housekeeping for the audience. Just a reminder that you do have both a chat session and a Q&A on the side of your presentation. If you have questions to ask our presenters here, our panelists, please put them into the Q&A. There's also a very handy feature where you can vote up questions. So if somebody has already asked a question that you'd like to have answered, please go ahead and vote that question up so that it comes to the top of our list. I think that is all of our housekeeping. We'll save our questions for the end, but if you think of questions that you want to ask our panelists, please pop that into the Q&A when you think of it, and we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. So I'm just going to share screen here, have a little bit of an introduction. All right. And Mary, can I get a quick confirmation everyone can see my screen?
Yep, it's up.
Awesome, thank you. So welcome everyone to Wisconsin Water Week. This is our session for Friends of the Water, citizen-led friends groups in the Lake Superior Basin. So first and foremost, what is a friends group? Friends groups are a familiar part of many nonprofit organizations. They're increasingly also encountered in connection with governmental and quasi-governmental organizations, including public universities, state historical organizations, park and recreational management agencies, and libraries. Friend groups typically provide financial and in some cases programmatic support, usually in the form of volunteers in connection with special events, to a single principal organization or its subsidiaries. Friends groups function wildly differently between different nonprofits, citizen groups, and governmental agencies, helping fill in the gaps where they're needed most. And each one is a little bit different. Most importantly, friends groups serve their communities, citizens, parks, environment, and people. I am Alex Faber of the Superior Rivers Watershed Association. We're a local nonprofit in Ashland, Wisconsin that engages citizens in water quality monitoring, and we help restore watersheds and protect our waters. I will be here interviewing our panelists, which are representatives, presidents, chairs of various friends groups in the region. These are by far not the only friends groups in our region, so I definitely encourage you to check out and find out what groups are in your backyard. But here with us today, we have groups from as far west as Superior, as far east as Iron County, the town of Pence in Iron County. We have the Friends of the Lake Superior Reserve. Mike Kutnick is the chair in Superior. We also have the Friends of the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore. We have Erica Peterson, president, located in Bayfield and the Apostle Islands. We also have Kathy Wendling, president of the Friends of the North Pikes Creek Wetlands, located in the town of Russell up on the Bayfield Peninsula. And we also have Kat Techman, who is the president of the Friends of the Gile Flowage, located in the towns of Cary and Pence in Iron County, Wisconsin. So with that, we are going to start hearing from our friends groups. So I'd like to ask first, what water issues do your organizations focus on? Mike?
Thank you, Alex, and thank you everybody who is attending this morning. It's a great opportunity to share a little bit with some fellow friends groups. So as a friends group, we don't necessarily work directly on water issues, but work indirectly and implicitly in supporting the Lake Superior Reserve. So the thoughts that I had about this topic relate to, first of all, our desire to inspire the public to understand what an estuary is, since we support the National Estuary Research Reserve, help understand what an estuary is, enjoy it, appreciate it, and support it, and help us in our efforts to support the reserve in improving and enhancing the estuary. So the way I like to think about this is our sort of area of interest being the lower St. Louis River, the waters that flow into it, and the lands over which those waters flow. We do provide direct assistance to the reserve for things like volunteer boat operators for the research boat, helping reserve staff place equipment for research projects out in the estuary. We do fundraising. We're trying to get a lot better at that. We did obtain sponsorships, as an example, for our 13th annual this year Lake Superior Summit, a big conference that draws 150 to 200 people around the estuary. Once the estuarium is able to open up again, I should say estuarium is the reserve's visitor center. We will also be tending to a gift shop operation to provide things for people of interest and provide us with a little additional funding. We also participate in events that the reserve conducts, Lake Superior Day event that the reserve does at their location, as an example. We also complement the mission of the reserve in doing things that they can't do. For instance, advocacy with Congress, which we're working on right now, leading into the budget negotiations and committee meetings that will hopefully get the new NER system budget approved. We are beginning to do a little bit of stewardship activities as well. We just recently adopted formally Wisconsin Point with the city of Superior. They have an official program for that. And we conducted our first beach cleanup last fall. And as a part of the adoption process with the city, we're committed to 2 annual beach cleanups for Wisconsin Point. And we're looking also to do some birding events out there as well, since Wisconsin Point is an important bird area. So I'll leave it with that for that question.
Erica? Oh, you're on mute still, Erica. There we go.
There you go. Thank you. I need a reminder. Well, thank you everybody for attending. It's an honor to be here with other friends groups. As I think developing relationships with each other is just going to strengthen our power as a friends group. The Friends of the Apostle Islands is a citizen nonprofit that looks at stewardship activities, supporting stewardship activities in the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore. So we work very closely with the National Park Service. Water is embedded in everything that we do in the Apostle Islands, how we get there, how we stay there, and how we get home very safely. And all of our volunteer efforts are influenced by the boss, Lake Superior. Most of what we do is interpretive in nature. All of our natural and cultural resources on the islands are influenced by water. And that's the story that we tell through interpretation activities and volunteer efforts. As far as issues concerning water, one big one is safe access. How do we get people out there safely and back? And then how do we make that access available to everyone universally? The islands are one of the most inaccessible of our national parks in the nation. And we work really hard as a friends group to try to make them more accessible, even if it's virtually, for those who will never get out there. As far as specific issues, we're always looking at how to react to the weather and to the lake and erosion problems. Those issues are human caused by visitation, but they're also natural, rising and falling lake levels and the impacts that and storms have on our access, be it docks or trails or campgrounds or whatever. Another issue is how we connect with the park visitor. We have no entrance station. There's no exact one spot that people go through that can learn about how to steward our park during their visit. So we're always looking at how do we contact and reach those people. Ranger contacts are very limited out there in the park. Another one is protecting the rich water-based culture of the Apostle Islands. Bayfield, the park, north end of our peninsula are all based on what the lake does for us and what it provides for us and how we can steward it. So what is that water-based culture and how do we perpetuate? The history of the Apostle Islands too was all water-based: fishing, farming, quarrying, lumber, shipping, the light stations, saving people's lives. Those are all really important cultural stories that we need to protect and preserve and extend into the future and make those safe. What we need to forever protect is the intangibles, 80% wilderness, 160 miles of undeveloped shoreline, places to play in, renew our spirit and our soul. These are things that we need to have for all our future generations, while affording importance to the local economy and the importance the Apostle Islands has on that economy. We have to look into the future as the influences of climate change, invasive species, increasing visitation, night sky pollution, and the list goes on. So as a Friends group, anticipating those needs into the future and working very closely with our community, our partners in the National Park Service.
Excellent. Thank you. And Kathy?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to introduce our listeners to the Friends of the North Pikes Creek Wetlands organization. As our name suggests, we're focused on the wetlands of the North Pikes Creek watershed, specifically on their protection and scientific management. North Pikes Creek originates in Beaver Wetlands, located on the Bayfield Peninsula in far northern Wisconsin, just 4 miles south of Lake Superior. The creek flows southeast and empties into Chequamegon Bay near the Les Foyt Fish Hatchery south of the city of Bayfield. North Pikes Creek is a WDNR designated outstanding resource water and an important Class 1 trout stream that harbors a self-sustaining population of brook trout. Because 50% of Wisconsin's historic wetlands have been lost, as well as conserving and managing our wetland property, we also engage in educating the public about the importance of wetlands in our ecosystems. And to help us do that, we recently created Beaver Hollow, an outdoor education and recreation area on an upland portion of our conservation property. Beaver Hollow is a universally accessible outdoor nature venue located halfway between the towns of Bayfield and Cornucopia. Beaver Hollow is open for people of all ages and all physical abilities to get outdoors and learn about and enjoy wetlands and wildlife. We encourage school classes, youth groups, conservation groups to hold educational events at our pavilion, and we invite the general public to visit and take time to view the great blue heron rookery that you can see from our boardwalk, or take a walk in the woods, or simply enjoy a tranquil experience outdoors in a wetland. We believe that people are more likely to protect those things that they can see, touch, and learn to appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And now Kat.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm Kathy Techman, and I'm the president of the Friends of the Gile Flowage Lake Association. We call ourselves FOG because sometimes we are in one, but we are a 501c3 qualified Wisconsin Lake Association, a nonprofit, and we are in over, I think, 17 or 18 years of existence. Formed when power came down the west side of the Gile Flowage, which is located near Hurley, Wisconsin, and formed by an elder requesting a lake association be formed to maintain the Northwoods character of this very unique 3,400 acre Laurentian Shield Lake, a dark sky lake. The Gile Flowage is unique. It's owned by the riparian lands and many of the uplands and the 20-some islands on this water body, which looks very much like the boundary waters, are owned by NSP Xcel Energy. The flowage itself is a storage facility for hydroelectric generation downstream at Saxon and Superior Falls, although there's no hydro generation at the Gile Flowage itself. So we're also unique as a lake association in that we're open to anyone. You don't need to be a property owner. You don't need to live in Iron County. Anyone who is interested in protection and stewardship of the Gile Flowage is welcome to join. We have about 60 some members. Many of them are non-locals, some are locals. We also include local government officials, businesses, et cetera, in our membership. So our water quality issues, the Gile Flowage has been in existence since the mid-40s. So it's a kind of a younger flowage if you compare it like to the Turtle Flammable Flowage. But it has, because it is used for hydroelectric generation, we of course have some issues with power, with water level fluctuations and erosion of shoreline, even though much of the flowage is kind of like a rock bowl because it is the Laurentian Shield Lake. So we work in partnership with Xcel Energy and also with the DNR to improve habitat. That's one of our big stewardship activities, is improvement of habitat, nearshore habitat for fisheries and wildlife. Water quality, of course, is an issue. We don't have much development at all within the watershed, very small towns and no businesses or industries. But as Erica was saying, changes in climate, temperature, extreme weather events, we're getting more erosion, more algal blooms in the flowage, etc. We also have the honor of being the first inland lake in Wisconsin to be infested with spiny water fleas. So we, of course, are dealing with that invasive species and concern about other invasives such as Eurasian water milfoil, which is in lakes around the Gile Flowage, but not in the flowage yet, becoming established, especially with our water level fluctuations and the exposure of lake substrate. Currently, we are undergoing something that is really bringing water quality and water to our attention, and that is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is licensing the Gile Dam. Our dam that creates the impoundment has never been licensed, and we're going through the FERC licensing process and scoping process right now, in which we're identifying water quality issues and other issues, which is really bringing these more to light to our members who appreciate the flowage for recreation values, but maybe not have thought as deeply and as concerned about some of the stewardship issues, but we're certainly thinking on that.
Thank you, guys. You all have so much going on right now with your organizations. And next, I'd really love to know, how does the work of citizens and volunteers factor into advancing the mission of your organizations? And we'll start with Mike again. You are on mute right now, Mike.
Thank you for that reminder. We are a very young organization, just past 4 years in existence. And so we're still pretty early on in developing, if you will, a stable of volunteers and tasks to task them with. But here's some of the perspectives that we're bringing to the picture at this point. Clearly, volunteers are a key part of our ability to create more programming and produce more events. And we're going to start soon a pretty significant effort to do outreach to recruit volunteers, and looking at a couple different ways to do that. But I thought it might be interesting to sort of turn the table a little bit and think about what it is that we intend to use volunteers for. So I will use a bit of a marketing concept to do that and talk about the kinds of audiences that we are thinking about reaching out to. So first of all, the general public. One of the things we want to do is work with, in cooperation with the city and the county, I should mention. We recently had an opportunity, both ourselves and the reserve, to present to the Superior City Council, as well as the Douglas County Board, just to make sure that those elected officials knew about us and knew what the opportunities were for leveraging the capabilities and the resources of both the reserve and the Friends. And so that inspire aspect that I talked about early is really to reach out to the general public. But we also want to reach out specifically to families. We were pleasantly surprised to learn we had a number of families that showed up to volunteer for our beach cleanup last fall. That was a very pleasant surprise, and that worked out quite well. But we also want to reach out specifically to people of color, indigenous community in particular, disabled, disadvantaged folks, and provide them ways to access and take advantage of the resources as well. And we're also learning more recently, there are a number of interest groups that we can connect with and co-opt into our efforts, so to speak. Birders in particular, with Wisconsin Point being an important bird area. There is a event that is sort of a community event, not a big organized event, called Jaeger Fest in mid to late September, where people come to see Jaegers, our water bird, and they bring in 100 or so people each September and enjoy watching them and you know, spending time and money in the local area, and we think there are opportunities to co-opt with them, so to speak, and I've had some conversations with organizations like the Wisconsin Society for Ornithology. Short answer there is we're looking for ways to partner up with other organizations with like interests that we can intersect and move forward with. And then lastly, most of what we are doing from a volunteer standpoint is based on the folks from our board right now. We've got a lot of enthusiastic board members who are willing and interested in volunteering. And now we're looking to partner up and explicitly recruit volunteers and get them trained up and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Erica, let's hear from you.
Sounds good. Our mission is to promote an appreciation for and preservation of the natural and cultural heritage of the Islands National Lakeshore. And I just want to dwell on heritage because it's so closely tied to our volunteer efforts and involving citizens in that effort. That heritage is property that may be inherited, and Friends of the Apostle Islands is working really hard to say that that is property that will be inherited by future generations. So the passion that our volunteers give to us is in an understanding that we're in this for the long haul. It's our 50th anniversary this year. We're looking at 1,000-year anniversary. And how do we maintain the heritage that we have, the culture that is the persona of the Bayfield area and so on. In today's over 400 national parks, it's almost impossible for the National Park Service to preserve these areas as they were created through legislation without the help of friends groups. And we're finding that more and more important. Hence why FANL, or the Friends of the Apostle Islands, is crucial in protecting that heritage into the future. How we've done it up to now is pretty much fundraising and friend raising for the sake of the National Park Service. And we do that by raising funds, donors, partnerships, grants, and the list kind of goes on. We just passed our milestone of having, since 2002, we have given $500,000 to the Islands National Lakeshore for priority projects that they could not have otherwise funded. And they fall into the categories of education and outreach, accessibility for all, stewardship of our natural and cultural resources, and service. Our workforce to date, like Mike's, have been pretty much our very active, passionate board over the years. And we are worker bees. We also have some committee members that help us. And in the last couple of years, we've had to change our emphasis and our skill set to include definitely more virtual and technology. And that's been very helpful. I also have to say that we've really been very fortunate to work closely with partners, and the partners from Minnesota, Wisconsin, and nationwide have really been a force in our workforce and moving forward. Specifically volunteers, we do volunteers out in the islands. Again, it's hard because of the water and the lake being the boss, but we're involved in erosion problems out there, restoring historical structures, getting kids from the local area out to the islands, and that list kind of goes on. And we have a lot of volunteers that are right there, want to be a part of those projects out there with a hands-on approach.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erica. Kathy?
Almost forgot to unmute here. The Friends of the North Pikes Creek Wetlands, I forgot to mention, we're a grassroots, community-driven 501c3 organization. We were formed by a handful of community members back in 2013 to purchase and protect wetland properties that were at risk of being changed to non-conservation purposes. Today, our group is still managed and guided by a board of directors consisting of member volunteers. Our organization depends on volunteers to achieve our mission. Our volunteers are engaged in every aspect of running the organization and managing the Beaver Hollow outdoor education area. I want to give you a taste of some of the things that our volunteers do. They conduct environmental monitoring. Our volunteers monitor water quality and temperature in cooperation with the Superior Rivers Watershed Association. Our birding members survey birds and input species sightings on eBird. North Pikes Creek Wetlands has been designated a birding hotspot. We partner with the Shawamagan Audubon Society. Our volunteers conduct mammal surveys by trail camera. We have 5 trail cameras out there, and one now is a Snapshot Wisconsin camera. Our volunteers also participate in a wide range of educational outreach efforts, which has been kind of on the back burner the last year. But in the past, we've had a very successful series of educational events at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center. Our volunteers also do everything from lead field trips at Beaver Hollow to organizing our speaker events, manning our tables, and even baking cookies for our events. Our volunteers have also built all the infrastructure at our outdoor nature area, including the universally accessible walkway, a kiosk, a pavilion, 600-foot long accessible boardwalk into a marsh. And additionally, we've gotten local businesses to volunteer both their labor and their equipment for work at Beaver Hollow. So as you can see, we depend heavily on our member volunteers to achieve our mission. We could not have accomplished everything that we've accomplished up to today without both the generous financial support of our members and the generous hands-on help from our volunteers. Thank you.
Thanks for that shout out too, Kathy and Kat.
Oh, thank you. Well, like many of the other groups that mentioned, we're totally volunteer as well with the volunteer board. In fact, we have a meeting tonight to talk about the FERC scoping document that we have prepared. We get people really to get involved in the water through hands-on activities. This is kind of an old school lake, you might say, flowage with little quaint cottages and cabins that have been in the local area and local families for many years. And the flowage has always kind of been there. And people love it for that. But as we know, things are changing, both in terms of recreation use, climate change. There's a number of issues, invasive species that are affecting, our inland lakes and the Gile Flowage too. So we try to get people actively involved. And of course, one of the ways we do that is everybody's interested in fishing. So any projects that we can do that can encourage habitat management, whether it's fish stick drops or fish cribs, which we've put plenty in the flowage now and plenty enough, but anything like that that gets our members out and citizens that want to join us out on the water to see the water body, get a passion for it, is something that we'll pursue. We also do island cleanup. We have over 20 islands, as I mentioned. They are not to be, Excel does not permit camping on them, but people camp on them. And so we do island cleanups once or twice a year to make sure that those islands are taken good care of, because there really has been a laissez-faire management by Excel of these properties. We do also aquatic invasive species monitoring, water quality monitoring through the DNR. And we do outreach to the public through a newsletter, now gone digital, our website, friendsofthegileflowage.org. And we also do a lot of news articles and media releases, talks with our local government officials, and of course, one-on-one with other citizens in the area and other people that are using the flowage to help them understand how precious it is and how unique it is, and stewardship opportunities they can participate in themselves.
Thank you all. I have one more question for you. We're at about 18 minutes left in this session. So when we get done with this last question, we'll be able to answer some of the Q&As from the audience. So my last question for all of you is, what has been your best method for recruiting and engaging citizens or volunteers, to the extent that your group does that or hopes to do that? And Mike, we'll start with you again.
Thanks, Alex. By the way, I am impressed with what all of you other friends groups are doing. It's just amazing. It's a pleasure to learn about that, and I can feel the excitement running through everybody's missions. Again, we're pretty early on in this process, but we're working hard to elevate our ability, both from a technology standpoint, as Kat was just talking about. One of the things that we're doing actively right now, we get an in-kind sort of staff support grant from something called the National Estuarine Research Reserve Association. It's kind of a professional and educational association of all of the reserves, the 29 reserves in the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. And they are providing us some consulting time, communications expertise particularly, to help us develop a 12-month communications plan. But also something I feel very strongly about is going to be important, us developing an elevator pitch and a tagline. That'll really help us coalesce and gain consensus amongst our board in terms of how it is that we think about our organization and how it is that we present ourselves to the public. And so we can have that crisp 30-second thing that you have in a conversation or with an elected official about who it is that you are, what you do, and that sort of thing. I actually tested out a little bit of that with you earlier about my reference to the estuary. We also do have a web page. We just generated our second iteration of a website last fall. We've got a really good board member who's tending to that, as well as our social media posts. She's doing a really good job with Facebook and Twitter. I guess every once in a while we push something out to Instagram as well. Not my forte by any stretch of the imagination. On our website, we also do have places to sign up for memberships and provide donations and declare volunteer interests. Behind the scenes on that, we have a system called Neon, which is a nonprofit-oriented customer relationship management system that helps us track everything behind the scenes. We had sporadic newsletters that going out, but we also enjoy now on the board a former communications specialist for Minnesota Sea Grant, who's now actually working for Wisconsin Extension. And she has really done a nice job of producing a professional quality quarterly newsletter that also gets posted to our website, and that's really elevated the kinds of hits that we have on both our website and Facebook. And she's also done some of our first efforts with generating press releases to local TV and radio and print media. And that actually generated a fair amount of the interest in people coming out and volunteering for a beach cleanup last fall. So we're looking forward to getting more power with that. As I mentioned, we're going to be more aggressive with membership and volunteer and fundraising campaigns. We already also are working on a current project where a UW Superior Service Learning class is developing a marketing plan for us. I'm really excited to see what the outcome of that's going to be. And then lastly, we've had some conversations with I'm not remembering the name of the town. Marshfield Clinic has a foundation that does work under the Reserve Wisconsin program, the Wisconsin iteration of the AmeriCorps program. And once we can rest our way to have enough budget, we're very excited about getting a annual sort of AmeriCorps volunteer to help us drive, recruit, and train volunteers.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And Erica?
Yeah, that sounds really neat, Mike. I'm glad you're going in that direction. The Friends has been working in that direction for a long time, and we've just recently met with a lot of success. And I'd have to say our best method for recruiting and engaging citizens is allow them, our constituents, an opportunity to engage in our story, so to speak. And in that way, we provide a platform for people to share those stories and experiences, and for us to share our stories about the islands. And if you might be create a product or a seed that we can grow all together. We have demonstrated growth by filling gaps in our board that have expertise in fundraising, writing grants, but more importantly is that website that Mike talked about, and developing out that website, including social media, YouTube, Instagram, eBlast, and Zooms with certain audiences out there, and reaching out through that and telling those stories, but telling them with a sense of gratitude also. I think gratitude is a very big part of why we do everything that we do, and the success that we have, creating service and an opportunity for people to engage in that. Also, it's been really helpful in recruiting and engaging citizens and volunteers because of our connection with the National Park Service. There's a lot of people out there that secretly always wanted to be a ranger, and that connection is really neat, especially as we say, what is it that a ranger does in these days in helping steward our natural resources into the future? Building relationships with donors on a very personal level is exceedingly important. Getting them excited in our seeds and growing those seeds and explaining why they're so important and how they fit into the long-range plan. And then selling ourselves, through our pillars. What is it? What are our four main pillars? And in our case, it's education and service and stewardship and accessibility. All of that is creating our persona, which is our brand. And it's that persona that people relate to. And how do you create that persona and have people invest in what we're so excited about? As a result of all of this, Friends just hired 2 executive directors. And I say 2 because it's a husband-wife team that are co-directing. And we could not have done this without 2 years of extensive evaluation of our resources and our potential. And knowing where our resources were was helpful through a data management system that we now use extensively, and continually building those relationships. I'd like to say that at some point, someone 1,000 years from now is going to stand on a beach on Outer Island, look out at the islands, and see the same thing that the people 1,000 years, 100, 500 years ago saw, and say, thank goodness that there were people like Friends who preserved this spot for us. And it's going to look the same, minus climate change, but thank you.
Kathy?
Well, how we recruit volunteers is an interesting question. We ask our new members to indicate on their membership form if they're interested in volunteering, and sometimes they'll actually come back to us and tell us what they want, what projects they'd like to volunteer for, which is great. But the challenge here is matching the volunteer's interest with their schedule and with our timeline for a project. Since we're doing building right now, we have a set timeline. Things have to be done in at a certain time in a certain order. But I think adding to what Erica said, I think one of our best methods is actually talking to people out in the community at our meetings, at our events over at Beaver Hollow. When our members see the progress that we're making at Beaver Hollow, it piques their interest in volunteering. It was really hard getting money to buy property when we say we're going to do this in the future. We keep saying in the future we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And there's much more interest now that people can actually come out and see something and appreciate something and enjoy something. Our volunteers have tripled. Our members actually come to us and tell us about projects they'd like to undertake, and they'd like to help work on them. So that's great too. The last year's been difficult because of COVID. 2 years ago, we had about a dozen people out there building a 525-foot handicapped accessible walkway, and they completed it in just 3 days. It was amazing. We had sometimes more volunteers than we needed on a particular day. Last summer, however, we had only 2 people building the boardwalk, a 600-foot boardwalk, while social distancing. Because the majority of our volunteers are retirees, we diligently follow the CDC guidelines for proper distancing. So the boardwalk project progressed really slowly. We're going to add on to it this year, but it looks like we're going to be able to have more people working together and continue our projects, because we have to add a restroom, which is something our members and users have asked for, begged for, and we're also putting in a wildflower garden. So any of you listening today, if you're interested in getting involved in any of our friends' projects or activities, anything from program planning to building infrastructure, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@northpikescreek.org. Thank you.
Kat?
Yeah, I see we're running short on time, so I'll try to make this quick. I actually think I answered most of this question the last time I had a chance to share. But let me say this, this is our lake association, and our lake has kind of been, like I said, old school. Local people primarily using it, families that have come for years, plugging away, loving fishing, kind of the same thing over and over. And now we're faced with this federal energy regulatory licensing, which is causing us to really look at the future of the flowage 40 to 50 years. And I sure appreciated Erica saying 1,000 years. We're having enough trouble thinking 40 to 50 years ahead of time. But that's a license that is going to be established for this flowage. The other issue that we have is that Xcel Energy is going to be divesting itself of its riparian lands around the flowage and its uplands and possibly its islands, which is going to have a huge impact on habitat, water quality, dark sky development, etc. So we're needing to think through this in partnership with both the DNR, the National Park Service is involved through their hydro unit, with Xcel Energy. And it's really causing us to think that things are changing and things don't stay the same as much as we think our lakes do. And we think of them kind of our own nostalgic way. They're changing. Invasive species, climate change was mentioned. Our use of our lake last year was probably more than tripled by new folks. So it's being discovered by others. And how do we manage all this? And how do we do this in a good way as a lake association and a group of volunteers facing something like the relicensing of our flowage and thinking of it in the future? So those are challenges, but also great opportunities to get new people involved in new ways. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you all. This has been incredibly informative. I've been looking forward to hearing about all of your groups. We are at only 5 minutes left on our presentation, and we do have quite a few questions coming in. So I'm going to do my best to ask a question, and if one of you would be able to answer, I know some of these are questions for all, but we're running out of time. And I do encourage the audience, if you are really interested in some of these groups or talking with anyone further, reach out on their websites. I believe you can actually message presenters directly through the platform, so feel free to send a message. But all these organizations are out there to be able to reach, and I will put up some information about their website shortly. The first question we have coming in is, do you actively recruit volunteers, and what steps do you take to retain and enhance the capacity of existing volunteers? I think we addressed that question pretty well in the last question here, but if anyone had something quick to add to that, otherwise we can move on to one of the next ones. Does anyone have anything more to add? Okay, that one came in pretty early in our presentation. How about, do you have any advice for entities looking to create a friends group? That is a very loaded question.
I might pipe in on that a little bit.
Okay, Mike.
It's good if you've got access to somebody who's a lawyer, first of all. I would also say, you know, bylaws, articles of incorporation, 501c3 status filing are the three big ones, right? And there are lots of patterns out there for good bylaws, for good articles of incorporation. There's a number of state-based nonprofit service organizations from which you can get examples of those. And I think you could reach out to any of our organizations, and we'd be happy to share copies of those documents with you as well.
Does anyone else have just a little bit more to add to that?
Well, you'll need to have, it's really important to realize that you're going to have to devote quite a bit of time to this. You need some spark plugs that are willing to pull the plow on it. It takes a lot of time and effort, and you need to have a passion about it. Oftentimes, something to gel around, oftentimes friends groups gel around one issue, but you have to think broader than that because that issue may be resolved, and then the reason that you formed is gone. So you have to think more broadly. Again, think in the future, as Erica mentioned, of whatever that you're forming for, what is it going to evolve to, and how are you going to keep people involved in that as you move forward?
I would add that it's important to pay attention to your articles of incorporation. Some people do that right away without thinking, but you'll use that information throughout with everything else that you do. So do it very carefully.
And we had a core people, a group of people that met for over a year before we actually got incorporated.
Oh, wow. That's a long time. One more question. A lot of national or even international environmental organizations frequently ask for donations. Why do you think it's important to think and act locally? That is also a very loaded question.
Well, in our case, if people didn't act locally, it wouldn't be done. I mean, there is no other group, citizen group, representing the Gile Flowage or within our area. So unless, and we have we have lake associations in Iron County, nothing really in Northern Iron County except for ours. And that's not to say we're the end all or be all, but if you're going to want something done, sometimes you need to do it yourself. And who better than local people that have the passion, the knowledge, the place-based experience. But again, it takes a lot of time and local effort.
Just
Erica?
to jump on.
Oh, sorry. It looks like Erica had something to say.
Go ahead, Erica.
Our organization draws upon constituents from all over the United States, even overseas and locally. And it's the local constituents that are doing the hands-on worker bee stuff. And also it's really important that the local community be involved in buffering what happens in the Islands National Lakeshore. Hence the connection of selling the National Lakeshore to the local community and showing the interconnections with the economy.
We are almost out of time. I apologize, we did not make it to all the questions, but I do want to encourage everyone to reach out to our speakers. There's some great questions. I'm sure there's great conversation going on in the chat. I'm really thankful to have all of you here, and I've learned a lot about everyone's organizations. I've been really looking forward to this, and I hope that everyone reaches out. I hope you guys are able to get some more volunteer work from this, and thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
you're doing.
Have a
Thank
good day,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see
Bye-bye.
y'all. Bye-bye.